Welcome, dear listener, to Jeremiad, a long-awaited return to the podcast. This is a big moment. This is a momentous moment. This is the first international Jeremiad that has been recorded. Your boy Tom is still in the UK, sadly, still in London. It is the 2nd of November now, so we're really getting into winter. But Andy, on the other hand, Mr. Globetrotter, Mr. Worldwide, Mr. Pitbull himself, please tell us what you've been up to for the last few months, because the world has been deprived of Jeremiad, and, I'm not pointing the finger of blame at you, but it is sort of largely down to your life decisions, but, please tell us.
Well, with great power comes great responsibility, and I do feel the weight of that tragedy. But sometimes great sacrifices have to be made for the better good, and considering the bigger picture of worldwide harmony and ultimate global health, which we here at Jeremiad remain staunchly committed to and invested in. The last few months, let me just bring you up to speed. But we'll start at a more recent relevant point, even just this very afternoon, because while right now, in Tom's predicament, it is the morning, I am deep into the tethers of evening, but this very afternoon, yes, as we blow into November now, I was stood on my balcony with no top on, because it's that bloody hot where I am. That's right, folks. Jeremiad is entirely international now. One half remains pitted in London, holding it down in the capital, and the other half is reporting from Bangkok, from that nexus of Asian persuasion, if you will. Effectively, we've dished a lot of dirt on the shores of the UK, and the government came knocking, and they made very clear noises that I would be incarcerated. No, of course, we don't hold such sway yet. But yeah, I figured, is the rest of the world as bad as the UK? Let's find out. So we basically instigated this Jeremiad on tour style adventure, and it's now 3 and a bit months, I believe, that I've been a man of Thai. Back to you, Tom.
Jeremiad, right now, we are straddling time zones. We are both present and past, future, all in one. We encompass all. There is no escape from Jeremiad. It will come for you. Wherever you are around the globe, Jeremiad will find you. It'll hunt you down. It's like a mist that slowly accrues. And sort of going on that then, with you being in Thailand and with it being bloody hot, we're going to talk today about living abroad effectively, life beyond the parameters of the UK, and how moving abroad can also put things into perspective about your own home life here in Britain, and perils, the trials and tribulations of settling in another country. It's not something that is unfamiliar to me either. It's a long time since I lived abroad now, but we'll touch on my experiences as well. Sometimes it's romanticized, isn't it? But it's not all it's cracked up to be, is it, Andy, at times?
Well, I think people like to believe dreams and Disney scenes, and that doesn't make them fools, but that does make them susceptible. And sometimes we come across a lot of bull, and it roller steams us. I think sometimes as well, quite naturally, people associate being abroad with holiday, and holiday in pretty much any country you go to is probably going to be fun because it is designated a holiday. In a sense, it isn't reality, is it? But when you do move somewhere, and you have to deal with the mundanity of ticking along an everyday existence and just staying alive, you are not, it's not so much a holiday anymore. So there are still things might feel as ecstatic as that. I think also, with a holiday comes a degree of novelty, and I don't know, there's nuanced things that you like about a place. Maybe you only like those over a 2-week period. So when you're facing those every day, it can become more of a challenge than a pro a little bit. I think it's certainly an interesting experience to do that, to go and live in a different country than where you had grown up. Obviously, for both of us, having grown up in the great wide all-conquering island that the UK likes to think itself as. I'm sure there's a lot of cultural differences that we both found when going to live somewhere else, and the way that we perceive it is largely influenced by the culture that we grew up in, right? So some of the things that are just shocking to us, or it makes me think about when people move to the UK, which is obviously a big point of contention right now, but the reverse of what I'm experiencing, how a lot of that is for them, or the things that maybe we take for granted about the place. It's November now. People always moan about the weather in Britain, but personally, I am a December baby, and I feel it's weird that I'm actually going to miss a winter. That's a strange concept for me, or that there's no autumnal leaves lining every path uh, on some kind of segment of commute right now. And people are walking through those and just sweeping those leaves away every day, like the leaves are an inconvenience. God damn you.
That's an interesting point. I think one thing we do take for granted in the UK is defined seasons, is having like winter, spring, summer, and autumn, and they all have very distinct characteristics.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I think with climate change, they are sort of melting a little into one another. I feel like they're not quite as clear as they used to be. It's not sort
Yeah.
of snow every winter. Or if we do get snow, it always seems to be quite late now. It's more of a spring thing, I find. It's usually we'll get it in like March or some really weird time of year when you really don't want it. It's rare we get it in and around December. I can only really remember a handful of white Christmases. But having, sort of where we are latitudinally and having like the hours of the day vary throughout the year is actually quite nice. Whereas
Yeah.
in Thailand, correct me if I'm wrong, but you effectively you have the wet season and the dry season.
That's effectively it. Yeah. And
That is it.
yeah.
And the hours don't really the daylight, because you're quite close to the equator. The daylight doesn't change drastically. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I think not so much. Obviously, in the UK, daylight savings are a big thing. So much so, the clock moves forwards and backwards at various points in the year. Just the other week, the clocks did move backwards in the UK, which means
They
that
did.
well, Thailand here was 6 hours ahead. Now I'm 7. I'm pulling even further into the future. Yeah, it seems. I mean, it's a snapshot of time that I've had here, really, to judge like that. But it seems to be light and dark at the same time each day, most days. And what a fitting place for us to start really talking about weather. And there is just a degree of consistency that you don't get in the UK. In the UK, it's consistent that the weather will change quite rapidly these days, right? But here, even if it's absolutely pissing down outside, it will still be so hot. The heat is just constant. That is a big challenge for anyone that first arrives, I'd imagine. But to think today, even the start of November, and just walking to a nearby shop and back, I would accrue some sweat. I think I've definitely acclimatized a little bit, because the first month or so I was here, that same journey, I would be drenched in sweat, like to the point I'd need to drink a lot of water and rehydrate afterwards.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Yeah.
just constant. It doesn't stop.
Now, on the sweat point, I mean, if Prince Andrew lived in Thailand, he'd be fine.
It might be
Sorry,
the best place
oh my
for
God,
him,
did I
actually.
just say Prince Andrew? Sorry, I meant Mr. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. God, please forgive my faux pas, because he doesn't sweat, so he'd be all right. On the sweat issue, this might be a revelation to some listeners. I used to live in Australia, in Brisbane for a year. You may remember, Andy, that I did
Quite
that.
so.
Brisbane's in Queensland, so it's quite far north, and it does have a very humid climate. It's quite similar to Thailand. I do remember the sweat. I remember walking home from work, and I'd get in, and I wouldn't take my t-shirt off. I would peel my t-shirt off
Yeah, yeah,
because I was just so fucking drenched. It was in some. I mean, it was quite a nice feeling. It was sort of nice finally getting in and just peeling it off, and I'd sort of be glistening, and I could just walk around topless for a bit. But also, I remember just it makes just little things like really exasperating. Like just going to the supermarket and carrying your shopping, carrying that when the humidity is striking you down, when
mm,
you know your grip on the bags is slipping because your palms are just, your palms are sweaty, your knees are weak, the shopping bags are heavy, I'm carrying all this spaghetti.
Yeah.
It's tough. So the humidity, and I think I got to Brisbane around May, so it was sort of winter, and the
Ooh.
winter was actually really nice. The winter was sort of almost like a British summer.
Okay.
Maybe not quite. It never got really hot. It was just a nice kind of 23, 24. Wasn't quite as humid. And then you go into the summer, and yeah, that humidity just dialed up.
Yeah.
And as you say, even when it pissed it down, it was just still so hot. But it was that proper tropical rain, which I quite liked actually. And you got the lightning and stuff. It was quite cool. But I think we Brits, not necessarily genetically built for such climes. I think it does make you appreciate, like imagine, a couple hundred years ago when the explorers of yore, or the old convicts or whoever were going out to these places, what they had to go through, what they had to, they didn't have air conditioning,
Yeah.
or ceiling fans or things like that. But it toughens you up.
Yeah, I
It's
suppose it
character
does.
building.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think you just get used to it. I think for me, I think at first sweating as much as you do was quite uncomfortable. Then I think there's a mixture of accepting that I can't really change it, it's just going to happen. Am I really going to let the fact that I'm sweaty take away from, what the experience might be? I think once you accept that you are going to get sweaty, oh, I am sweaty, big whoop, then, you crack on with it. And a little bit by little bit, it does get better.
I mean, one thing I would say, I never had to use moisturizer out there.
Well, honestly, that is one point I would make. For all that the heat can be a challenge, for me, someone that's had issues with eczema like the majority of my adult life, it's never been better than out here. The humidity in the air is fantastic for that. It's the opposite of a bitter UK winter, which I do love on a personal level, but definitely does not love me. Drying out the skin all the time, it's cracking all the time. You need all the cream, moisturizer dries out. Out here, no way, no way at all. And when it does rain like that, it doesn't take long to get dry after. Because I was always surprised about how little people. You see people using umbrellas a lot more to protect them from the sun when it is quite sharp, as opposed to when it's raining. When it's raining, people more or less just carry on because they're just used to it, and often it'll rain really heavily, but not for very long.
And actually, it can. I used to find it could be quite refreshing almost. Kind of there's that after rain smell in the air, that kind of hot rain smell.
Yeah,
Difficult to define, but you know the one I mean. It's quite nice actually. I'm getting really personal on this episode. I did also spend some time in Thailand. You're not the only one, Andy. You're not special. No, not as long as you. I think I was there for about 3 weeks.
Amateur
Something
numbers.
like that.
Yeah.
I know, fucking amateur, right? Like I couldn't hack it. I just had to go. One thing I remember about Thailand that I enjoyed it. I'm not sure I'd necessarily go back, to be honest, unless it was to like visit you. But one thing that struck me about Thailand life, and maybe you see this as well, is just the amount of plastic you see everywhere.
That is a point I was going to mention.
Okay, I'm glad you were going to mention that, because I remember seeing, you'd even see like individual bananas in like a 7-Eleven.
Yeah, in a plastic package.
Wrapped in plastic.
Yeah.
Just plastic everywhere, man. No?
Yes, it's part of a sprawling convenience culture that does have Asia within its grip. The convenience is fucking wild out here. It's not pedestrianised at all, this life. It's not. And that is something that I struggled with as a very British man. Sometimes I dislike my Britishness, other times I'm very steadfast about it. I am a pedestrian. Let me walk, I say. Let me walk. Eating out, for the most part, is probably cheaper than making food on your own.
Yeah.
Because it is just such a normalised part of the culture and the economy. And I think then with that does come just a lot of throwaway and Yeah, you'll get plastic with everything. If I go into a 7-Eleven and I've got my backpack and I just buy a couple of things, they will still, go to. I have to say, no, I don't need a bag. If you go to get an iced coffee somewhere, for example, or a smoothie, because fruit smoothies are actually a tangible thing to consume every day here.
Yeah.
Delightful, also. But yeah, that will be in a plastic cup and then also in a little plastic bag, so you can carry it easier. And there's lots of places really where randomly you'll just see almost like impromptu landfill where there's just rucks and rucks of discarded plastic from old consumables. So I don't think there's really much in terms of recycling schemes like that.
I remember even seeing like people drinking out of plastic bags used as vessels, and then someone would have a straw. I mean, it's almost like, yeah, like you say, like everything's like it's like a Russian doll of plastic bags. You think
Yeah,
you take out, there's one bag and there's a bag within that. It's like bagception. I do remember seeing a lot of plastic everywhere, and obviously a country like Thailand, I think there's a certain nonchalance when it comes to a certain attitude of indifference, actually. But then also, I don't know, perhaps if it's just an infrastructure thing, like it costs a lot to recycle. I don't know if we should be too us from our in our Western gaze, if we should be too judgmental that they don't recycle enough. But I think they probably could do a bit more. But
yeah,
it's a really difficult thing as an individual out there to avoid, as you say, that there's still, even if you go in with a bag for life or something, they're still very much like trying to give you plastic. It's tough. It's tough to avoid, and I remember that even in my brief time there. It's not just Thailand as well. I think it's actually quite in Asia. I think the the four biggest uh, producers of plastic in the world are China, the Philippines, Indonesia, and I can't remember what the fourth is. But I remember
yeah,
three of the top four were all in it. The fourth one might have been like the US or something. But when I was in Indonesia as well, and you'd see just like waterways, rivers, just kind of with this sort of like plastic bergs,
yeah.
floating down, or they've all blocked up or something like that. And you'd see them in the beach as well, in the ocean. It's quite sad, really.
Yeah, I think it is often a question of the regulation that is in place and also the infrastructure available. I think it certainly made me reflect because, yeah, typically from a UK lens, you see something like that and it represents exactly the kind of images that government and industry bodies in the UK tell us we need to stay clear of and have proper schemes in place. But a lot of it is veiled in deceit, and the West likes to talk big about green pledges and sort of guilting conscience of average citizens a little bit. But a lot of it is effectively just marketing, isn't it? And a different way for a new company to sell a fucking product at the end of it. So I think there's a lot of big talk about recycling and an idea of shame about not doing it, but still not so much that actually is tangibly done. It's a bit of a mirage priority, I think, a lot of the time in the West. So whereas maybe, on the face of it in Asia, when you see a lot of discarded rubbish, it looks bad, but, they're not. I don't know. Maybe it's the lesser of two demons. Yeah, I don't think one is necessarily better than the other in that way. It's just a very interesting thing to actually see, and yeah, like you say, you can't really help but participate in it.
And well, I think for me, it just sort of it kind of instilled us almost like a sense of despair. It's kind of like, well, I can recycle as much plastic as I can personally, and I can try and avoid plastic as much as possible. I could go to a zero waste shop and fill up on oats and lentils and little brown bags or whatever, or like Tupperware that I've brought in myself, and I can try my best to avoid plastic in my personal life. But let's say what I, as an individual, could possibly avoid within a year, I feel like within about 15 minutes in Asia, that will all just be back in the environment. Do you know what I mean? It's like a kind of, what's the point? sort of
Oh
thing.
well,
It's
yeah,
like when you see Jeff Bezos sending his wife and Katy Perry up into space for a 10-minute vanity ride, which has probably produced more CO2 than you or me could ever hope to put out in about 2 years' time. Do you know what I mean? It's kind
yeah,
of like it's a horrible attitude to have, because obviously we should really be concerned about the environment and the climate. But when you see the scale of it and just how much is being put out there, it almost you just kind of feel like, well, what's the point? I guess I just kind of do it for my own personal life. I mean, I try and avoid microplastics as much as I can for health reasons. You know, I'm a loose leaf tea boy. No tea bags for me. I don't trust them. It just sort of makes you feel a little hopeless almost.
yeah. I think that's
How do you even start to clean all that up?
you can't, can you? And maybe it poses greater sort of philosophical questions about the importance of focusing on what you can control in your own life. But I do think that's always the narrative with environmentalism is, you could have the many on the right side, but it's always the few that have the means that are going to do away with those virtues and tarnish it all in a second. I remember on a very famous previous Jeremiad episode where we spilt the beans on a certain Miss T Swift taking private jets and her whole PR operation to go to a Jets football game and covering that shit up. And, so how much emissions has she contributed and damage done to the environment in this one swift ride on a jet, as opposed to, she could have organized a rally and got hundreds of thousands of her own fans involved, and they've all made these wonderful health and environmental conscious choices for a week or whatever. It doesn't mean nothing, but there's something to be said from trying, right? That's all you can. That's all you can do.
No, of course, of course. I'm not saying it's totally pointless and we should all just then abandon recycling and trying to be environmentally conscious. As you said there, it's funny enough, Taylor Swift came into my mind as well. I knew we had discussed this. That it does annoy me how responsibility for the planet's welfare is kind of a lot of the times put on individuals. It's on you to recycle. You have to think about your carbon footprint, right? Like mine personally is though, so I should feel. I mean, you've flown all the way to Thailand,
Yeah,
right? You've had
that's not.
to, but as you're just one individual getting on. You shouldn't feel guilty about just getting on a plane, because how else are you going to get there? Do you know what I mean? It's actually the corporations and the governments, etc., who are the big, the oil companies. They're the big polluters, but
Yeah.
they have the money. They have the money, so they don't have to worry. I feel like we've gone slightly off topic there, but
Well,
all
no, not at all.
worthy discussions to be having.
Well,
Um,
when a program like this goes international, there are always newer seas to discuss that reveal themselves, and
Polluted seas.
well, polluted seas. That's one thing
Yeah.
I've certainly found, that actually it's not just the UK that has polluted seas; they're everywhere. The whole world is corrupt, to say it in a nutshell. But while we're on
Mm.
the notion of recycling, and particularly the viewpoint that the UK can have, or I think there's generally a sense, isn't there, in the West about looking at Asia as still like developing countries, as they're referred to. But there's many things where actually the way that life is here makes you think that people are a bit, not people are dumb in the UK, but there are obvious changes that could be made. And I know that you were a big fan from your previous travels and explorations of the B Day. What a simple but revolutionary thing that is. You think about the amount of tree that goes into becoming toilet paper that literally just gets flushed down the fucking toilet. And yet, the concept of a B-day is often treated with repulsion, the very least hesitancy, when mentioned in the UK.
I'm so glad you brought up the bidet. Actually, that's one thing
Mm.
I wasn't even on my agenda. Actually, it's just become so ingrained into my life. So I was smitten with the bidet in Asia. They also call it the bum gun.
The bum gun, a
Um,
douche. I have heard other ruder terms.
if you're German, it is Arschpistole. But yeah, I remember sort of. and particularly in Asia, because the food it can be pretty spicy.
Mm.
It might result, maybe hygiene standards aren't quite up to scratch, or at least what we have in the UK. You're probably going to have some less than solid poos. You're going to have some poos where there might be a little burn, and the cooling respite of the bum gun was an absolute lifesaver out there. And in fact, I loved the bidets so much that I own one now. I actually had to, my old one broke. I thought, right, life has presented me with an opportunity here. I'm upgrading. I bought a really nice one.
Okay.
It's a portable. It's similar to the one I had. It's a portable electric one. You just fill it up with water, and then it has like a little nozzle. You press the button, and it just fires a stream of a jet of water. My argument is, I always say this to people who are a bit sort of weirded out by the fact I use a bidet. I'm just like, well, if you got a bit of poo on your hand, would you just get some toilet paper and kind of wipe that off and be like, right, all done? No, you wouldn't, would you? You'd wash it. You'd probably even get soap on there.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you do the same for your bum? But it is an interesting obsession we have with just focusing purely on toilet paper. I think maybe on continental Europe, bidets are a bit more common, but certainly in the UK, there's almost like a taboo around it.
Yeah.
I really don't understand it, because just from a pure health perspective, from a cleanliness perspective, it's so much better. And it just I don't know, just you feel cleaner, you feel nicer, it's a better experience. Don't get it. I love the bidet, and you're absolutely right. That is where they are. Every toilet will have one attached. They are way ahead of us on that one.
So
100% agreed.
So if there are any bidet companies looking for a podcast to endorse, please do get in touch. We would love to represent your bum guns officially. They could incorporate a feature that when you press the button, it doesn't just spray a jet, it also plays a selected snippet of Jeremiad audio. How perfect would that be? Yeah. I think also there you made the comparison, didn't you? The analogy of washing your hands in reference to using the bidet. So I think you're saying there really everyone needs to start treating their arse like they treat their hands.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's good to know. I think I also know the reason why we don't really do that in the UK, and that's because of Andrex. That's because of anthropomorphized branding. The whole UK believes that dog is still only alive now because people buy Andrex.
It's big loo roll corp.
It really is.
Andrex is basically like a modern day Skynet.
Yeah, people need to beware.
But no, I think that's definitely one place where they have things right. I'm going to counter that. Sorry to be negative here. This was one thing that particularly got to me, and I don't know. Maybe it's different now because you live there. You are becoming more settled in, and you're not maybe so obviously a tourist. I assume people still kind of look at you and think tourist, white man.
Yeah,
should make sense. But one thing that actually did get to me a bit, and initially it was kind of like sort of funny, but after a while it was just kind of the scams and just how everyone's out to scam you. Literally everyone, and that includes like authorities and government officials, and police, etc., etc. You just cannot trust anyone. But I even remember like getting ripped off on some boat tickets, and the guy was like literally in like the ticket office. You think this is a man, he's in a uniform, it's official, it's above board. No, you cannot trust anyone. So it actually really eroded my trust in the people. And look, and again, I want to sort of caveat with the fact that I know GDP per capita isn't that high in Thailand, and the surge of tourism to the country, they want to obviously capitalize on that, and I get that. And they see Westerners and they think, oh, rich Westerners, great. And though they're trying to make a couple of extra 100 baht, I'm not going to begrudge them for that, and I kind of get where they're coming from. But it does happen to you constantly, and people are being nice to you, but you just wonder, well, are they being nice to me because they want to be, or is it because they're trying to get something out of me? And it kind of plays with you a bit psychologically. And I just found, out of all I went to Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Indonesia. And I think out of all those four, Thailand was the worst for the scammers. You know, I remember like in Bangkok, for example, and like we were going to like have you been to the like the sort of imperial palace, like the Great Temple
Oh, the
there?
Grand Palace.
Yeah.
I've been around the outside of it. I've not actually visited it properly yet.
Okay. I mean, the thing is, you might have found this already. You get a bit templed out. Once you've
Sure.
seen about 4 or 5 temples, you've pretty much seen them all. But we went to the Grand Palace, and there were these people, you know, these guys saying, "Oh, it's closed today. It's closed." There's all these this. There were like these yellow flags. They were like the flags mean it's closed, but it just wasn't. That was just a lie. They were
Hmm.
just basically saying it was closed. Then it's like, oh well, this temple's closed, but hop on this tuk tuk with me, and I'll take you to a secret temple. Blah de
Okay.
blah de blah that is open, and it's only open on this one day of the year, kind of bullshit. And yeah, so it's just sort of like it was kind of funny. That was sort of in the early Bangkok days, but after a while, it did kind of erode my trust a bit in people. Whereas when I was in Indonesia, for example, I thought it was almost the opposite. People would speak to me, but I don't think they wanted anything out of it for themselves other than to just converse, to
Okay.
maybe have a cultural exchange. I got offered a lot of food by people, a lot of food. Like someone gave me some sort of like deep fried banana once that was really
Oh,
nice, and
nice.
some like peanut brittle.
Yeah.
And the thought I had was second point really on this. To end my little rant here with something slightly more positive. I found interestingly that in those cultures, even though people had less, they were often willing to give more. They were willing to share a bit more. I think in the West, we have a very much this is mine, I've earned this, I've paid for this kind of attitude towards things. Whereas over there, even though maybe they don't have as much money or as many possessions, they were perhaps more willing to, you know, just share and just, you know, like, here, have some of my food. Like, I'm
Hmm.
not that rich, but, you know, like, let's sit on this bench, share a bit of peanut brittle together and talk about whatever the UK and stuff like that. So that's that. I'm balancing out my rant there, not to seem too anti. Just on the record, I really enjoyed my time in Asia, and on the whole, it was great. But the scamming did get to me after a while.
Yeah, I don't think anyone enjoys being scammed, right? It's only fun when you are scamming. That's what I would say. I think you do typically find, even if we hate capitalism or a capitalist system, we are unfortunately very afflicted by it. You spent your whole life in it, then I think it does encourage that degree of, no, this thing is mine because, that's the whole way that you're sort of rooted. I had to work, so I got money, so I bought that thing, so it represents all this other stuff. Whereas in cultures that are a bit more collectivist, or maybe it's, I don't know, okay or easier to get by on less in some ways, there is a very different philosophy. Yeah, with the scamming thing, there is definitely that sense that in Asia, white people are seen as being richer. That's kind of the narrative that history tells, for one thing, and that's what a lot of people in those countries have grown up believing. So, I don't think it's a personal thing often. It's probably just more what you represent, isn't it? And I think there is something about the way that the countries run and the nuances of how they can differ in sort of everyday operation to the Western world. There's a lot of value on, or I don't know, the way that things are organized in time or ahead of time, and things are punctual and advanced, and there's value on that in the UK, particularly. In my experience here, last minute is a way of life because sabai sabai, right? Chill chill. They say that Thai people don't really like living with stress at all. And I think that then factors into something like that, where things can be a little bit last minute and backhanded. And, sure, maybe the ticket man should operate a certain way, but actually has jurisdiction to underhand something a little bit. I don't know. I think it probably depends on where you're going and what you're doing as well. But one thing I've seen quite standard is like national parks, things like that, for example, will have one price for Thai citizens to get in and one price for foreign visitors to get in. But I think we see the UK, I think in my perspective, I've certainly seen that for people that have moved to the UK, people that have come over to study or to live and they've gone through the visa process in the UK. Oh my God. It's crazy how much money they get out of you as from these processes. Different institutions looking to put their fist in your pocket where they can. And coming here, I've certainly experienced that happening to me on like a governmental level, or like in terms of the visa, things like that. But it's very hard to not look like a tourist somewhere like here. And I think you're probably always going to get that kind of hassle or interest in that way. But it does cut both ways. I've had it also where, I've met people, or people have wanted to share food or just have nice times that are devoid of any kind of financial impetus. It can be a strange thing that plays on your mind like that. And I think maybe the difference is just time. I think you have longer in a situation, you see it more, don't you? So maybe the gloss wears off it, but you're also a bit less pierced by it.
Yeah, I think once you've probably been in Thailand for a lot longer now, and you'll start to see how it operates on a day-to-day level, you can probably have more insight. Like I say, I was just more of a backpacker, a traveller,
Yeah.
a tourist, however you want to label it, So I'm only there for 3 weeks is still it's kind of longer than your average holiday. Saw a good amount of the country, and
Yeah.
I like to, I've always been a very respectful tourist. I will always try and I'll always learn, the basic words for thank you and please and things like that. Just little details, little customs. If you go into a temple, I know, I guess it maybe more applies to women about, sort of modesty and things like that. How do the roads work as well? Like trying to cross. I think Vietnam was the worst place for this. Trying to cross the street in Vietnam, geez, you basically after a while you just learn, right? You just got to start walking. Like even though the traffic is coming, it's mostly a lot of it's like scooters and stuff as it is in Thailand. People, you don't see that many cars. People obviously it's scooter life out there.
Yes.
You just kind of have to go. You just go, and the scooters, they see you and they do sort of move, and it's weird. It is kind of like organized chaos, the traffic out there.
Yes.
That was actually a thing that got to me as well. And maybe you have experienced this, but is the very liberal application of horns when it comes to driving around those countries. People are not hesitant to beep. Beep, 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 all the time. All the fucking time. The worst was if I say took a night bus somewhere and the bus driver, he'd be beeping, 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 and then maybe from around 1 he'd stop beeping, but then at about 5 in the morning he'd start up the beeping again. And it's not like here, a beep is sort of like, well, mostly it's if you're annoyed at someone, they've cut you off, or they weren't looking, or they didn't let you out of the roundabout or something. Or it's if someone's about to do something really dangerous and you want to warn them. But it feels like a last resort here, doesn't it? It's like I don't know. I didn't really beep that much as a driver, but I think in general London's a bit different. London is very beep centric. I see it all the time. People are not afraid to let people know they're pissed. But I feel like it's more of it's a sign you're annoyed or it's a warning. Whereas in Asia, it's just standard practice. If you're just going around a vehicle, if you're doing a takeover, if you're rounding a corner, it's just beep. It's not necessarily angry kind of beeping or pissed off, but it made me angry and it used to piss me off. Good grief. And I guess maybe, I don't know, hopefully you're in a slightly quieter part of Bangkok, but do you experience the daily beep?
Indeed you do. I used to live in Birmingham and hear police cars go past my window pretty much every night. So I think it seems tamer where I live.
Mostly coming for you, Andy.
Mostly, yeah. And it's amazing they could never find me, considering I was just right there. But in my understanding, the beep actually takes on a different function here. It's more like you use a beep to say, I'm coming through, more or less to alert people of your presence. The road networks are very interesting. And there's so many side streets and alleys that lead directly onto the main road. And obviously you've got cars, but a lot of the time, the bikes, it certainly is bike country. And, they can pull out quickly and cut across lanes and everything. So the notion of just using that beep to say more or less I'm here, or like if a car is starting to pull out in front, you beep to sort of tell them no, hold fire, I'm coming. So I think it certainly adds to the madcap feel of traffic here, which I'm quite enamored with, really, because I am a son of chaos, and it is it is that. But there really is a rhythm to it. You know, it is very different. The UK is far more organized than chaos in terms of the roads, but yeah, over here it's way more chaos than organization. But still is that sense of organization. It's just a bit more informal and between those on the road, I think.
I did hire scooters and sort of drive around Thailand and stuff, and it was really fun. I was pulled over by the police in
Mm.
Chiang Mai. Interestingly, he was an Australian police officer called Larry, who was working for the Thai police. And I have to assume that he basically got fired in Australia for corruption and being a bent copper, and thought, right, I'll go work in Thailand where the police are pretty fucking corrupt. But it was really funny. He was such a knobhead. He like pulled me over, and then because I didn't have an international driving license, he sort of fined
Yeah,
me there.
yeah.
It was something like 500 baht, which was
Hmm.
maybe like a tenner, I think. And he was just like, "Do you boys have travel insurance? Well, you don't now." And then he was just such a knobhead. And then he wrote me like a little receipt, which basically said, "Right, I can drive for like 3 days or whatever without having to pay another fine." And
Okay.
so off we went. And honestly, I would say about less than a minute later, I got pulled over again, and I whipped out this little receipt that Larry had
Yep.
written me, and the police officer looked so pissed off because you know that money that I gave, was going to go straight into his back pocket. Like, it's not going to like the general Thai police and to fund their training and their resources or whatever it is they need. So yeah, that's another sort of thing to negotiate, is just the way the police operate in those countries is totally different. I don't know if you had any run-ins with the coppers yet. You've
No,
been
not
keeping it
really.
low key.
Yeah, I'm not trying to try my luck.
Have you watched The Beach since you've been in Thailand?
I haven't seen that film, but I was very close to actually being at that beach.
Maya Bay, a great example of how social media tourism can also affect countries like
Oh
Thailand.
yeah, yeah,
Because Maya Bay, made famous by the beach, which is an okay film. I think it starts off quite promising, and then I think it kind of it's not DiCaprio's best work, to be honest. I don't mind it. I should probably read the book actually, but Maya Bay at one point I think was averaging like 5,000 tourists a day, and it's a
yeah.
really small beach. It's not a big beach at all. And it got to the point where the Thai government just shut it down. They were like, right, this is actually destroying the ecosystem here. But it's a bit of a success story as well, because even within like a year or so of shutting it down, the reef started to heal. There were certain species of fish and shark that had come back that hadn't been spotted in the waters. When I was in Thailand, it was still banned. I think have they
Ah,
reopened it now,
yeah. I
or
believe it
is
is
it
reopened.
controlled now at least?
Exactly that. Yeah. So there's a limit on how many people can actually go there, and a few of the other islands operate similarly because there's always demand to go and see them. But yeah, they do have an approach of wanting to be responsible and protective of that environment, which is interesting because there's certainly something there in comparison to, like we say, plastic being everywhere. So there is some degree of consciousness about protecting or safeguarding the environment in that degree. I think it showed the rest of the world a little bit what can happen, can't it, if you do implement something or restrict this access, and how nature can heal.
We're the virus, Andy.
Well, of course, we know that. And what else does Jeremiad stand for other than broadcasting the fact that we are indeed the virus? Every virus needs a parasite as the face of its brand. So that's Jeremiad.
Speaking of Jeremiads, I have composed a little ditty here.
Ooh la
Now
la.
I'm gonna preface this because I kind of thought I would talk a bit more about my time living in Australia and New Zealand, so it's kind of based a little more on that. But maybe we could save that for another episode. Maybe I'll have to go back out there and record from the bush. You know, But yeah, no, I have composed this little piece that I think sort of encapsulates maybe what living abroad can be like. It's less a Jeremiad and just more of a little poem, but just sit back and enjoy. I, the stranger on foreign shores, in lands unknown, a traveller, a backpacker, a tourist, a prisoner of Mother England set free to be with the offspring of convicts, of hell-raisers and scallywags of yore, my life boiled down into a rucksack, my life strapped to my shoulders, a shrug as I say Shropshire, the Midlands, the forgotten realm, I, the wanderer from distant lands, I am but no more than where I am from, British, English, Salopian. Why have you come? What brought you to our shores? Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, Terra Australis, the great southern continent, the Southern Cross, the leap into the future, the eastern sun and 40-degree latitudes, a false smile, an outstretched hand, platitudes and niceties, I, the loner, drifting along, stop and have a chat, gather round the fire. You may learn something about me or about yourself. Stinging blisters, stiff necks, dreams of vineyards and rows of kiwi fruit. I, the backpacker, the simple man. That was.
I see. That's delightful. Lovely to hear a poetic twist of the
Thank you.
tongue there, Tom.
No, thank you. It was there was a point that I had in there somewhere about the fact when I was in Australia and New Zealand, I felt like a lot of the time my entire identity just boiled down to basically being just a British man and a foreigner. I don't know if you've experienced the same thing in Thailand, but it's just like that was like it. We are much more than that, of course, but obviously where you're from is massively a part of who you are and the culture you grow up in and your accent, the way you pronounce words, cultural differences, etc. But I just at times it used to annoy me that I feel like people couldn't see beyond just simply me being like a Brit, a prisoner of Mother England, a POM, and all this kind of thing. And also as well, I found particularly in New Zealand where I was more of a backpacker, is the one thing that also used to really annoy me is like that again was sort of your identity. You're just a backpacker. You're here to just do really like manual kind of labor jobs and travel around. And there was almost this kind of assumption that just because you're like, the work I was doing was, picking fruit, working on vineyards, work any old schmuck can do really. Just, monotonous, boring work. But that's kind of the point. I'm just there to do simple jobs, save money, travel around. But they kind of just, I don't know, almost like there was this assumption that maybe you're a bit stupid or something because of the work you're doing is very simple and mundane. There was something about Kiwis, they're generally very nice, but there was also a sense of them looking a bit down on you, which used to kind of annoy me actually, because it's like, yeah, no, I've look, I have a degree, I'm an intelligent individual, but I have chosen to come here and to do this simple work because that's just an experience I wanted. And it's a working holiday visa, emphasis on the holiday, so I'm just here to do some simple, fruit picking and stuff and then travel around. That's like the point. That doesn't make me stupid.
But to some degree, every immigrant or traveller is an inconvenience to the native. And I think particularly where countries are used to having this influx, you do just get viewed as another one. You're just like, oh, the next, shaggy
Yeah.
haired guy with a backpack out here. To them, that pretty much is your identity. But yeah, it can be really interesting, can't it? You think there's all these facets about you that are the most interesting or what you base your identity or personality around. And yet, you step abroad and all of the nuance kind of fades away a little bit. It does sort of strip you to the core in a way, and that can both be quite a freeing thing, and where people enjoy the space to reinvent themselves, but it can also be very hollowing.
Yeah, interesting there what you say about it being a freeing thing. I guess at times the sort of the lack of identity is, yeah, it was sometimes quite liberating. I do
Yeah.
remember kind of, particularly in New Zealand, I could kind of just not care as much about like my appearance, about the things I did, the way I presented myself. I mean, like I went and I dyed my hair blonde, and it looked bloody awful. I was, because basically, like my entire existence was just I couldn't like buy like nice clothes or anything. Like I was, everything had to fit in my bag or like my car at the time. So I was just sort of dressed a bit. I just looked kind of disheveled a lot of the time, really. But whereas if I walk around here, in the UK, I kind of want to look a bit nicer, a bit more groomed and presentable. But out there, I didn't care. And then maybe that's why then people would look at me and just think, oh, just a backpacker, because I was probably walking around like
Yeah,
I
and
hadn't shaved for weeks, just in these sort of ragtag clothes. So maybe I didn't help myself really. Perhaps I leaned into the backpacker lifestyle too much. But yeah, it's I guess there's two sides to that coin. There is the sort of liberty that comes of being abroad and not having to care as much, but then also kind of being reduced to just this one thing, this one sort of idea.
I think there is an element as well. There's like the media stereotypes of what a tourist is, or like what these
Mm,
countries tell their citizens about tourists or their view on tourism at large. And most of the time, it is going to be a certain way. It is going to be that they are secondary citizens because they're temporary, right? And either if they're here to pay into it's like the whole notion. People complain in Britain about foreigners coming over to take jobs that British people would do, moaning the whole time about the prospect of doing those jobs. So it could be the similar sort of thing, that the people that are operating the kind of establishments where you were going and working doing manual labor, and that's become a pipeline for bringing foreigners to the country. Some people might think, well, why can't fellow Kiwis do that? And almost then just it's what you represent, isn't it? Not even you as a person. I think that, yeah, that's been a very apparent thing for me on these travels, that difference.
we've covered a lot of good ground here, but I want to sort of ask one final question to you then. What do you consider yourself? Are you a foreigner, an immigrant, or are you an expat, which is the much more which is what British people love to call themselves, don't they? They're expats.
Yeah, I don't
You're an
really.
expatriate. Are you a teacher? Are you a wanderer? Are you a traveller?
I
Are
think,
you are you just an idea, a spirit?
yeah, a pest. I think to be an expat, you have to first be patriotic, right? And that's not me. I can't be an immigrant because I'm too temporarily here. So I think just foreigner works well, and that
You're
sounds
just a
very close
foreigner.
to farang, which is basically the Thai term for foreigner. So I live the
Okay,
farang existence. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, but it is interesting the sort of the nuances between foreigner, immigrant, expat, etc. Old Brits who go and live in Spain are always considered expat, whereas anyone who comes here is never. You
It's
don't have
an immigrant.
expats living in the UK, do you? You just
No,
have
of course.
immigrants and foreigners. So I just think the semantics are quite interesting.
They're
Um,
aggressive. Yeah,
yeah.
by design.
Well, there's a little food for thought then for the listeners to be left with.